So my surfaces typically start with this all over pattern that's some kind of, usually some kind of repeated object, something that's hopefully sort of interesting visually on its own. And I look at how it might sort of like curl into the inside or sort of pop into the inside in different ways and how it kind of curls across the bottom. Um, and then it gets overlaid with this sort of animal and text, usually in the form of this speech bubble. This foreground is the white slip again, and then this background is all underglaze. So all the color is just coming from this underglaze, and you can see how it shows through pretty clearly through that slip. And then once I have something in mind, I start to sketch. I used to do all my sketching on paper, and now I do a lot of it digitally. I'll say what I love about working digitally is that, and when I say digital, I'm talking about, I use Procreate on an iPad. What I really like about it is that it's so easy to just like make up a quick sheet with several different sizes. I can flip them really easily. I don't have to worry about ruining or losing the original because there's no original. And it's just, I find it really useful that way to have sort of a digital library. You can do the same thing with paper. I would scan and sort of reduce and enlarge and flip and that kind of thing. So that's another option. But having sort of like different sizes available that you can then apply to different forms can be really useful. And eventually I start to build up an image library. So I have like just sort of random sketches of background elements, and then I start to sort these sort of by animal and theme, and I can just kind of like leaf through these sketches. Often there's sort of more than one size. I can leaf through these and figure out like what what to go on that next piece. So I have a mug that I already slipped up, and it's pretty firm at this point. It's nowhere near bone dry, but it's like, firm leather. And you'll notice I haven't done the inside yet. I will, but right now we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a sharp pencil and just trace around. So this is just, a drawing that I made and cut out. Uh, I'm just going to trace it with this sharp pencil. And what it's going to do is it's going to just sort of incise the slip a little bit. And that's okay because that line that it creates is going to get filled back in with the top layer of slip. And so I'm just kind of quickly, sorry, I need my chair. Okay, sorry. So we're just going to trace that really quick. And one thing is, as I get to the bottom of the piece, since this this mug tapers in at the bottom, there's a bit of an optical illusion that happens where the the drawing will appear to get really narrow because it's sort of tapering down the curve. So if you have a pot that like curves down to a foot or curves down to this flat base, I like to kind of compensate for that optical illusion by just sort of like going out a little, bowing out a little bit from the drawing. If it's a perfectly upright, like straight up and down wall, you can just trace it just as is. But I like to just kind of like make it a little wider than it would have been. And it's still going to appear to narrow, but not quite to the same degree. And I usually stop my designs, so I don't stop right at the bottom ridge. What I like to do is I like to put one of my sort of pattern elements on the bottom and bring that foreground figure up to like to bump into that. So I'll have a little of that slip will curve around into the bottom. I'll show you. Let me just trace this one really quick. And then once I have these just sort of in place, then I can paint the background.